Today we go back to the lectionary, to the chapter 6 in the Gospel of John. John spends most of this chapter referring to bread. And if we weren't in a pandemic, I would make sure that we weren't just talking about bread, but that you would be able to nibble on some bread each Sunday. But, because I think we all like bread. Do you like bread? Does anyone else out there like bread? Yes. Even when my husband couldn't have gluten, we found ways to eat bread. There's something about bread that we just, I don't know, we don't think we can do without. I pretty much grew up on what we called white bread when I was younger. I don't think it was that sustaining, but I lived in an isolated part of the country, and our local store only had 2 brands of bread, and they were all white. One was Wonder Bread. Do you remember Wonder Bread? I think the only thing that was wonder about it was that it could stay on your shelf forever and still look the same, right? A little scary, really. When I arrived after college in the big metropolis of Tokyo, I discovered pawn shops, and pawn is bread in Portuguese. And the Japanese, many centuries ago, when the Portuguese came to Japan, they didn't have bread then, and so they got into this Portuguese food, and they kept the name pawn, even in Japanese. And there were pawn shops at every train station stop and every bus stop. And so as someone who just came from college, I was fascinated by these different breads. And I had to try every single one of them. And it was there that I learned what a real croissant was. Because growing up, I only got crescent rolls from those Pillsbury tubes, And, wow, a croissant is amazing, right? And so bread, I love bread. I shouldn't say that out loud. In ancient times, bread was seen as a staple as well. Fish and bread, bread and fish, fish and bread. And in fact, this morning's gospel reading comes just after the time that Jesus had fed the 5,000 bread and fish. And the crowd, was very pleased with this, and they were satisfied. They had been with Jesus all day. They listened to his stories, and they watched his miracles, maybe even experienced some healing miracles. And by the end of the day, the men, women, and children were hungry. And Jesus, aware that people can get hungry, and he knew that this crowd of people were far from home, he wanted to make sure that they were fed. And so with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, Jesus fed the crowd and even had food left over. Well, the people were quite impressed with this miracle. Maybe they even thought the bread was tasty and they wanted more. But when they got up the next morning, Jesus was nowhere to be found. So they hop into boats, head across the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum. And sure enough, there is Jesus and his disciples. They spot him, and the crowd should have been happy, right? But they weren't happy. They were a bit entitled because they told Jesus, "You're here. You didn't tell us you were leaving, and you didn't even tell us where you were going." And Jesus, not very concerned about their protesting, and he doesn't feel the need to answer to them. In fact, he's not even impressed that they seem to want more time with him, because Jesus is aware of what they are really needing, what they are after. He knows that they're not just there to look for him, but they just want some more of that bread, that they want more miracles. And he looks at them and says, "Folks, you're not really looking for me. You think you want to be entertained more. The problem with always needing entertainment is that you are never satisfied. Well, it's easy for us listening to the gospel reading or reading that gospel to look at that crowd and say, yeah, like you had an amazing miracle happen. You had your stomachs filled. Couldn't that be enough? And why would you even need more? An experience like that would be something you would talk about for a lifetime. But if we are honest with ourselves, we can be those people too. We too don't want to miss anything. We now even have an acronym, FOMO. Fear of missing out, FOMO, right? Are you afraid of missing out sometimes? Friday night, you're sitting home, you might be missing out on something. We live in this entertainment capital of the world. There are so many fantastic shows to see. There's more Elvises than one can count. And we have an indoor circus and so much else happening. And it is one of the reasons why I love living here, a great variety of things to do and see and experience. But all these amazing experiences, amazing opportunities can easily affect how we see our spiritual lives, how we want our spiritual lives to be fed. Because we end up wanting to mirror what's on the outside for what we get on the inside. We want to show Jesus, a show worship service. We want something new every week. But the glitz and the glamour can drown out the still small voice within. It can drown out the still small voice of God. And we miss seeing Jesus. We don't experience Jesus or really learn from Jesus. Every week I receive emails from church leadership groups on how to improve church life. 5 key ways to improve your church's YouTube channel. 6 suggestions to promote your youth group. 50 ways to bring in more people. 5 ways to boost online and engagement. And then this past week an article came that said, get ready, there's a second wave of church conflict coming. I imagine that I'm not the only one, not just pastors get these kind of emails, but educators and businesses and doctors, all getting emails or people coming to their doors trying to help us be better at, let me put that in quotes, better at meeting the needs of people, the needs that people think they have, to keep them satisfied, to keep them entertained. It's hard for us not to fall for that. But Jesus doesn't fall for that with this crowd. He doesn't fall for their pleas. He's pretty direct with them. And he says, you will never satisfy your hunger with a belly full of food. Long ago, St. Augustine said that we have a God-shaped vacuum that only Christ can fill. The psalmist wrote for us to be still and know that I am God. Have you done that activity or the little prayer where you say, and I want us to try that now. In your mind, you can close your eyes and I will pray this as you listen. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know. Be still. Be. It's very difficult for us to allow ourselves to just be present, because there's so much happening around us that we have gotten into that, the habit of thinking that we have to have more in order to fulfill us. And yet Jesus tells them to put their energy into finding the life-giving food that will never stop nourishing you. It's right here for us. And then referring to himself, Jesus said, I guarantee you that the new human will give it to you. Jesus knows that what we really need and ultimately desire is soul food. Soul food that lasts forever and doesn't change from generation to generation. And so the people want to know, what can they do, they ask. What can we do to have this life-giving, eternal, sustaining bread? It's so easy for us to be like them as well in that. We all think that we must do something in order to receive from God. Have you ever had that experience that when someone gives you a gift, you might automatically think, I don't have anything for you. And yet, when you receive from anyone, and from God especially, just receive and be grateful, rather than thinking you must do something back. And Jesus tells them that good news. This gift God gives is really simply putting your trust in God. Putting your trust in the one that God sent. But still they're not satisfied. They want to be sure. They want to be sure that they are doing the right thing and the good thing, and that they actually deserve this life-giving bread. But Jesus keeps with them, stays with them, and says that they need to understand that this is a gift. This life-giving bread is a gift from God. Be still and know. Give up all and surrender and know. And then they get it. We'll take it, sir. This is soul food. This heavenly bread is what we need and what we want. And then Jesus looks at them and says, I am the bread of life. When we put our whole trust in God, we will be satisfied. During the bombing raid of World War II, thousands of children were orphaned and left to starve. The fortunate ones were rescued and placed in refugee camps where they received food and good care. But many of these children who had lost their families, their homes, and never received good food, they had a hard time sleeping at night. They were afraid that when they would wake up, that they would once again be homeless and without food. Nothing seemed to reassure them. And finally, someone had the idea of giving each child a piece of bread that they could hold on to at bedtime. Holding their bread, these children could finally sleep in peace. All through the night, the bread reminded them, today I ate, and I will eat again tomorrow. Holding on to that bread reminded them that they had had enough that day and that they would have enough tomorrow. My friends, we too can have that assurance as we rest in the presence of God, knowing that Jesus will satisfy our soul needs. And that we too will be assured that today we are filled with the great I am, filled with the bread of life, and that tomorrow Jesus will satisfy us once more. Amen.